Planning on changing the world just like me. You could be the chairwoman and I'll be the trustee. Let me give all to your benefit. Then I'll get blessed out my deficit.
Hello, hello, hello. It is Tangiel Johnson yet again with your Corporate IQ, and I am your host for today.
And I'm your co-host, Lachez Solage.
Lachez, you know what time it is.
Yes, I do.
Girl, okay, so you know the check that we gotta do. Let me just see if you're ready. If you're really ready. Um, is your hair done?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Makeup bid.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And I see, where are the pearls, girl? Is your pearls?
Yeah, I'm hiding them, huh?
There,
Let's see.
there
There it
you
is.
go. There you go. Okay, then people, get the theme music queued up for all you listeners out there. This is how we get down when we start the Your Corporate IQ. In the words of Q-Tip, high, low, or even open toe, put your heels on, baby. And if you're a dude,
Yes.
put your boots on. All right, so Lachez, I'm super excited about our guest today. You know, she is a consummate HR professional who has
Wow.
used education, internships, as well as professional organizations to get her where she is today. But before
Wow.
we start and I bring her on, I want to go ahead and put out our disclaimer, which basically says that the views expressed by your corporate IQ are our own, as well as for our guests. They're our own, and they do not reflect the views of any company or organization. And so, with that said, I want to thank you all for joining us at your Corporate IQ podcast, where we will discuss the pearls and the perils of corporate America with a lens from the people of color experience. And today's segment is on why corporate can be a great option. And the special guest of today is none other than Miss Shantel McClendon. Shantel holds an MBA from Howard University School of Business, and her bachelor's degree is in business administration with a concentration in human resources from the Bryan School of Business and Economics at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. Shantel is currently the HR director for PepsiCo in Atlanta, Georgia. I can't believe that. Just a side note, I can't believe that we met in Greensboro and now here we are together in Atlanta, Georgia. Mind blowing. She has
Wow.
experience. Yeah, isn't that crazy? She has experience in transportation,
Mm,
manufacturing, and banking. In addition, Chantel increased employee engagement index scores by 8% points
mm.
in a 600 plus employee manufacturing facility by conducting internal and external evaluations of how leadership met the needs of the hourly workforce. Chantel,
Ah.
welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about joining you all today. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And so excited to hear about, your corporate experience. So with that, let's jump in if you're ready.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. So share with us, we're going to take you back here, but
Mhm.
share with us your journey, starting with your internship all the way through where you are today.
Absolutely. So, my journey with my internship started at UNCG. While I was there, I had four different internships. So, it started with an organization called Inroads, which they placed minority students in corporate internship experiences. And so, I started with my first two summers at an organization called Nortel Networks. And so my first internship I was a marketing insight analyst. That's back when I thought I wanted to do marketing, and I thought it was going to be, the glitz and glamour side of marketing, like advertising, but I was an insight analyst, which meant I looked at data to forecast. So I realized that's not for me, and I had a very transparent conversation with my intern manager and said I would like to start connecting with HR to lay some foundation for my next year internship. And so then the next summer with Nortel, I was in an HR internship. And within their employee HR service center. And so that was a really great experience. And then the next summer, going into my senior year, I worked for a subsidiary of United Technology at the time in Mebane, North Carolina. So really enjoyed that. Actually got a partial scholarship from them that summer as well. And so then when I went back to school senior year, I was also an intern at a staffing agency. So I was able to get a lot of great experiences in my internships. And I really owe it a lot to being a member of the Inroads organization because they were the reason I was able to get my first corporate internship. So after that, once I graduated, I did graduate in 2009 during a recession. So all the places I interned, they weren't hiring. So that was a little devastating for me. But
Wow.
at that time, when I was going into graduation, I wasn't really thinking about grad school. I was like, well, I went to undergrad. Why do I need to go get a master's degree? And then I graduated. So reality hit me really quickly there. And then moved into a role within banking at Wells Fargo. I was there for about a year, and then I transitioned to Volvo Group, where I worked in the recruiting team. That's where I met Tangiel, and so was there for a year as well. And then I got accepted into Howard's MBA program, and I moved to DC. And so my internship,
DC.
yes, I love it. And so when I moved to for grad school, I was applying for a lot of internships, and I knew going to get my MBA instead of pivoting and doing a master's in HR that the companies that were coming to campus weren't necessarily recruiting for HR, but I knew I wanted to go to Howard's program and I knew I wanted to work in HR, so I was going to make it happen. And that's when I moved into a role, my first internship, my first manufacturing experience, and I absolutely loved it. Now, I did show up on the first day in a dress, and my manager said, "Hey, if you want to finish the rest of the day, I need you to go home and change and put on some pants so you can go on the plant floor." But after that, I really loved the experience. Um, and I really enjoyed the experience interacting with the frontline employees. And then I received a full-time offer from that role, internship. So that internship was in Cincinnati, Ohio, in one of their manufacturing plants. And then I moved to Davidson, North Carolina after grad school, where I was working at the corporate headquarters for Ingersoll Rand. And I had two different roles while there. And then I went out into the field, into their largest manufacturing location at the time, the HVAC manufacturer was a part of Ingersoll Rand, and it was over 1,000 employees there. So I was doing a lot of employee engagement project work, some employee value proposition work there. Then after that, that's when I transitioned to International Paper. I was there for 6 years. My first role with them was within a paper mill, which I had never been to a paper mill before. Um,
Wow.
this was in Riegelwood, North Carolina, and Riegelwood is named after the paper mill. So that's how small of a town it was.
Wow.
So before International Paper bought them, it was called Regal Paper, I believe. And so the town was named after the paper mill. And so I had a really great experience there. They were going through major transformation where they were going from making what was called coated paper boards. So like, your McDonald's French fry boxes, your postcards and things like that, just areas where that type of paper was not, it was on the decline. And so they were transitioning to making fluff pulp, which is things that go in like feminine hygiene products, diapers and things like that. And the
Mm.
Southeast had a really big, the natural resource, which was, I believe, the soft pine trees. And so they decided to go through that transformation. And I was able to be a part of a major transformation for the 2 years I was there. Then after that, I wanted to get exposure on the other side of the business. So I moved to their corrugated box business, where my first role on that side of the business was supporting multiple locations between Middle Tennessee and Northern Alabama, really
Wow.
enjoyed that experience. It was my first time sitting on lead teams. And so it was definitely a stretch for me learning how to be a leader, a part of a leadership team. And then I moved from Middle Tennessee to Atlanta, and I covered all of the corrugated manufacturing locations for Georgia that fell under our business unit. So that was 4 locations. A lot of
Wow.
change was going on in the largest location there. Had some cultural changes that we needed to make, had some leadership changes we needed to make. And so I was really excited to be a part of that team because you could just see things shifting with the right leaders in the right roles. And so I was able to make a really big impact on that team. And then, as I got married and things like that, just looking for other opportunities and getting exposure in new industries. That's when I moved to PepsiCo, and this was my first executive role as HR director. So this has been very eye opening for me, learning a new industry, building a new HR team, and we have some changes that we have going on across the market that I support. So between opening new buildings and expanding our market share and things like that. So I'm getting a lot of great exposure here. But you learn a lot of new things in your first executive role, and so that's where I am in my career, and I'm enjoying it every day.
Awesome. Wow,
Awesome.
wow. There's a lot. There's a lot there.
There's a lot.
So I do want to pull out quite a few things that, I mean, there's so many things that are significant about what you said, but I want to pull out a few things. I think it's amazing that, for one, that you, and I'm sure we're going to get into this later too, how you've really optimized the idea of internships,
Yes,
right? So this is like a really amazing perspective that we haven't had on the show so far. Someone that is really just really navigating in that kind of really niche area of internship navigation. You really used internships effectively to navigate in your career, and also kind of humbled yourself to do them as you saw the need to
yes.
do so. Is that about right?
Absolutely. What I would say from my internship experience, so, my mother always worked in a corporate space. She was an executive admin most of my childhood growing up. And so she always had a window into corporate America for us just because we would help her with things and things like that. But she never went to college. So we were my twin sister and I were navigating college. Experiences differently because my mother hadn't ever experienced them. And so I remember the first time I was in my Black Business Student Association meeting and Inroads came in, and they really just stressed the importance that you can have the academics, but you also need the practical experience. And that's where internships come in. And, when I told my mother about it, she drove home the point of, yeah, you definitely have to get these experiences. And I remember calling my sister and said, have you heard of Inroads? Because she was at UNC Chapel Hill. And I told her about it. And the intake session was in 2 weeks at North Carolina State, and we both went to Raleigh and applied. And so they really instilled a lot in us in Inroads. We had Saturday sessions where they would do executive coaching and just tell us what to do in corporate spaces, and just really had a lot of different workshops and social activities that really made me value the internship experience. And so I went back every summer with Inroads, and I think they really had a big investment in me and how I look at internships, because you can't just have the grades, because there are so many people out there with a 3.5 GPA. How are you going to differentiate yourself? And I probably can see, if I look back at where some of my peers who may not taken advantage of internships, how that had a different outcome from maybe some of the experience those of us who did have internships did have.
Well, let me ask you one more thing about internships then, because again, you've effectively navigated that space. So the internships, I'll ask your opinion on that. Were they fairly robust? So, there's different internship experiences. There are ones that are really robust where you're really getting hands-on
Mhm.
training and you're really doing the work, and there's others that aren't so robust. So talk to me a little bit about that and your experience in those.
Absolutely. So I'll speak about one of my undergraduate internships, and then I'll talk about my graduate school internship. So one of my last internships in undergrad was at United Technology. And so the branch of the business had just recently been purchased, and they had they have moved some of the manufacturing warehousing work to another country. And so some of the things that we were trying to transition into the UTC way of doing things was the onboarding experience for our employees. And that was a big lift. And there were a lot of changes going on for that time, and even some leadership changes that happened while I was there. So, really making sure we're implementing that parent company's expectations for how onboarding and HR practices should be done. That's work that I was doing. And, our global HR manager and our domestic HR manager left during my internship. So it was me, another HR intern, and the HR admin, and then the HR manager from Mexico was coming up. And so they absolutely relied on us as interns to do value added work. And so I really appreciated that. And even so much so that, we got a lot of compliments. That's one of the ways I was able to get a partial scholarship from there, just the work we were doing and being nominated because of the value added work we were doing. And then when I go to my graduate school internship, I was essentially an HR business partner. So I was
Wow.
responsible for a certain workforce. I was helping building another onboarding process because the plant manager at that specific location, he was a part of the rotational program, and he felt he had a very poor onboarding experience, and he didn't want anyone to experience that type of onboarding under his leadership. And so I was working on that. And then the other piece was I really got to learn the business in my internships, and got to have really in-depth conversations with the plant manager and how we were moving forward with things. And so I got to sit in on grievance meetings and help give responses there. So just real practical HR business partner experiences. And then I own the mid-year review process for that location for the summer as well. So it was really value added work. And I enjoyed getting to know the frontline employees as well as the leaders, and just getting a very different perspective of how many different types of people can work in one setting, and you have to adapt to your audience and things like that. So very critical HR skills that I picked up, and really critical work that I was able to do as an intern.
Wow, fantastic, fantastic. It's good to hear that some corporations are doing a good job with these
Mhm.
internships, and that's been my experience too. I think Volvo does a good job with their internships, and the programs are fairly robust where their experience that the interns can put on their resume, they've done some serious work for the organization.
And you
Um,
build networks. I don't want people to forget that piece of an internship. You have to build networks. And honestly, there are relationships that I still have from previous companies and internships that have helped me throughout my career.
Awesome.
awesome, awesome. I like that. So, as we said, the topic for today is, why is corporate a good option, right? So there's, of course, early in someone's career, there are several options. You could go a different route, or you can go the corporate route. So you're someone that's had a great experience. So share that with our listeners. Why? Why is that, from your opinion?
Yeah, I think for me, all of the companies that I've worked for, especially early on in my career, they have what they tend to call some type of rotational program or
Mm,
accelerated development program. And I think those programs are really great. Every company I've worked for has one. I was in two different ones between Ingersoll Rand and International Paper. And what it gives you an opportunity to do, it's a learning space, but also you're actually doing the work, and you get a lot of exposure and investment from a development standpoint that you may not be able to get in smaller locations and smaller companies. And they really invest in that, and it's the ongoing development that I've received throughout my career, because right now I'm not in any development program, but I am currently in a very extensive coaching ignite coaching experience right now. I go to several conferences where I'm learning to develop my leadership style. I have my a career coach that I have through this coaching program. And so for me, it's the constant development that you can receive throughout your career. And I know for me, initially moving into corporate America, I wanted to have that rotational development experience so I could get the foundation I need to be a really great HR business partner.
Great. If I had to sum that up, I would say, for the listeners even, or I would say for the early career folks, or even folks that have children that are going to be moving into these spaces like early on in their career, I think what you're saying is perhaps the strategy could be really look for companies that offer extensive
Hmm.
training and development, offer programs, offer rotational programs, really do research on companies that are investing in their employees and associates with training and development and rotation programs, because that seems like it's been the key to your success and longevity in your career, but because all of those companies seem to have offered those things.
Absolutely. And Inroads was the organization that introduced me to that concept, because that's essentially what they were doing for us as interns, because they would have the offsite development sessions on Saturdays as we were going into our internships, and they would have those throughout the year. So I really liked that structure. And so when I saw that companies had that structure as well for, entry level roles, I knew I wanted to go that path.
Awesome. Now, did Inroads, did they promote certain companies? Like, so did they already have corporate partners that they worked with that they knew that, company X, Y, and Z offer these types of rotational programs? Okay,
Mhm. So
perfect,
they
perfect.
had
So why,
partnerships. So I know North was one of those. Yeah.
okay, perfect, perfect. So maybe another thing we're socializing to the listeners is find these programs, find these organizations like Inroads, if not Inroads, right?
Hmm.
Programs like them because they really have those connections with these companies that have those services already.
Absolutely.
Awesome. My next question is why HR? So, you've shared why corporate is a good pathway. And so why specialize in HR, for you?
Yeah. So what I really love about HR is that I have an opportunity to learn in a business. I've been in several different industries, and I've really gotten to take a deep dive and understand the business, and then understand how that business impacts the people who work there, and be the liaison between that to really help people. One of my biggest passions in working in HR, I love to help people who may not even know their potential, but working with them and helping them develop, they discover their potential and what they want to do, and helping them strive and meet their goals that they have from a professional standpoint. That's one of the things I really enjoy. And something that I am very passionate about is seeing more people of color get to executive levels. And so being able to invest in people and see the impact that investing in people has on a business, that's why I enjoy HR.
Mm.
Awesome. Wow, that's fantastic. Would you say the majority of your work has been more on the kind of HR business partner side, more on the strategic side, more so than the kind of HR generalist work?
Yeah, so early in my career, I was definitely an HR generalist in the beginning of my career, and something I really strive to do is get to the strategy piece, and be able to think more long term. So the back half of where I've been in my career now has been more of the strategy work. Since my role, moving into my role when I was in international paper on the box side of the business, that's when I started doing more of the strategic work. And that's really a lane I enjoy being in.
I have
Perfect.
something. I
Perfect.
have a quick question. So I've had the privilege of working in HR on the talent side, but
Mhm.
I've recognized that there's two types of HR. There's HR in a corporate operational setting, and then there's HR in manufacturing. Um,
Yes.
that's
Right.
very different. The operations of that are very different. Can you explain that to our listeners?
Yeah, and so that's a great question. And I've working in the corporate setting, being in recruiting, working as a business partner, supporting global groups, and then being in the field, you have to be very agile and be able to adapt. So in manufacturing, especially when I was in more of my HR generalist roles, you are dealing with a lot of the day to day. So a
Hmm.
lot of the employees look to HR to really help them navigate all the ins and outs of being an employee of this operation. Sometimes you have employees sharing some of their most personal experiences that they need support in, and it can be a lot that you take on every day. But I enjoy it. And so in the field, there's probably a lot more tactical work that you're doing, and it can be hard work, but it's work that I do enjoy. Um, but then you have to be agile and you have to know how to adapt to your audience, because in the same breath, you're supporting hundreds of frontline employees, but then you also have senior managers there. And then
Mhm.
if you're on an HR team, you still have to work with your function who may be within the corporate space. I've always been very empathetic to our talent acquisition teams, because there are times where they probably get the brunt of concerns and complaints. But as someone who worked in that space, I'm very empathetic, and I
Thank you.
know that I'm going to build a partnership, because I think one thing that I appreciate about my experience is it can be work in the field. It can be tough. It's not always easy. And I know some of my toughest times working in the field was during COVID, things I've never
Mm.
experienced before. But you learn how agile you are and how much of a resource you have to be for the people you support. And so all of those experiences have helped me in my corporate experiences as well, because I'm not going to forget what it felt like to be an HR business partner in the field. And then if I'm working on strategy and we're saying, oh, we're going to implement this big idea, but we're not taking into consideration that, oh, these locations have 4-day work weeks with 10-hour shifts. This idea can't work here. And so for me, I very much value my in-field experience, because I think it's going to make me a better strategic HR leader.
Perfect. I would
Excellent.
say like in manufacturing, I can, I've worked in that space. Tangio's worked in that space. I've actually sat on location, so I totally understand that some of these rural sites and locations in
Yes.
manufacturing as well. So always curious about, as a person of color, woman of color, your experience in manufacturing. Did you see any differences with that? And also, did you encounter any biases? Was there anything that was different about your experience as a woman of color in manufacturing?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I mean, I think I've definitely had unique experiences. I think about going to a paper mill in Riegelwood, North Carolina. I'm from North Carolina, but I had never heard of Riegelwood, North Carolina. And so, going into it was in one of the poorest counties in in North Carolina. And so just seeing that, and most of the times I was you could be one of the only women in the room. I'm most of the lead team was male, most of them white male. So how do you show up? Do you feel like you have to change yourself? And even though I've worked in manufacturing companies where one may have these preconceived notions, I've always felt like I could show up like myself. Do you have to
Interesting.
adapt? And I've had very interesting experiences where I've had, union stewards and things, feel that I was speaking to them poorly just because they didn't like what I was saying, or they probably never had to encounter where your HR business partner is a black woman. They've not had that experience, and I'm telling you what you can and cannot do to stay within the parameters of the company's expectations or laws, you know. And so, sometimes you can get certain pushback that you won't expect. I mean, there were times when I'm driving from state to state in the South, and I have to drive past a Confederate flag every day or once a week, and so I think about commuting back and forth between the South. I mean, I was very clear that, hey, I don't stop on this 2-hour drive. So I need to make sure I'm prepared, because if you're driving past those things, you have concern, and I'm traveling by myself. So I do know there are things that I probably have to take into considerations that others don't, just being a woman and being a woman of color, and being, specifically being a black woman. Um, I've had my experiences, like I stated, when, people miss, they perceive my communication a certain way. Just because I'm being direct doesn't mean I'm being rude or disrespectful, but that's not something some have to overanalyze the way I would have to. So I have those experiences, but I will say I do feel very lucky. Like, I've not experienced any type of overt racism or anything like that. I do recognize, I notice when I'm one of one in a room, though.
I think what's interesting about what you said is like the overt racism is in my opinion easier, right?
Hmm.
Because it is that it's overt. My question to you though is the things that are not so blatant that you
Hmm.
face as a woman of color. And again, I'll continue to stay in the manufacturing lane because again, that was always a space. So I was in recruitment, so I wasn't in HR when I was in those spaces, but I often thought of how challenging
Yeah.
it could have been or would have been for me as an HR professional at those sites, from the perspective of getting buy-in from not only those line employees, but
Yeah.
also from the leaders at those sites. Again, the majority of the individuals there at those sites don't look like you, whether it's
Right.
the line employees or the leaders. So being able to get that buy-in for what you're trying to do, as well as feeling supported in your efforts.
Yeah. And so something that I always did is made sure I had a very open and transparent relationship with my manager. So one, I'm always going to do the work, and I pride myself in being a very honest and trustworthy person in general, but especially at work, because I know I have to have that support you're talking about, to be able to get that buy-in. And so I start with my manager, and we have open conversations about what support looks like and how I approach things and how I work. So that way, when, I'm getting pushback and I'm challenging, I know I'm going to have my leader support, because I do recognize that I probably have to do a little bit more to establish that in spaces where people are not used to engaging with someone who looks like me, or having to, listen and take direction, especially in HR when you don't always have direct reports. You have to really lean on your influence, because
Mhm.
it's different to influence someone when you're their direct manager. It's very different when they have no line or dotted line to you and you have to tell them to go in the right direction. So I really pride myself in building the relationships first before I have to tell someone no. And that has really helped me, because I've only had one black manager and I've only had one female manager. And so
Hmm.
most of the time, they don't always look like me. And so, but that doesn't mean I can't build a relationship with you. Working in manufacturing, when I've worked in, North Carolina, rural North Carolina, or rural Tennessee, I know nothing about hunting, but I get to know what the ins and outs are those, so I can have conversations with people and understand what they're talking about when they're sharing their personal um, enjoyments with me. Do I go deer hunting? No, but I can talk about it.
Yeah,
Awesome. Awesome. Maybe finding that
fabulous.
commonality with them, right? And building those relationships with them. Sounds like that was a way that you were able to build that trust
Yes.
with those the line employees, which I know is difficult. I know we spent a lot of time on manufacturing. I do want to get into because you did pivot out of
Hmm.
manufacturing. We have to spend some time on, that experience and how that's different for you. I think we would be remiss if we didn't do that.
Absolutely. So, in my current role, we do have manufacturing, but sales is a much bigger component of where I work now. And so for me, it's really understanding and seeing that there's a very different approach to things and outlook and how we make decisions when you go from organizations that are probably heavily run with people with engineering backgrounds versus going over to pivoting and seeing an organization that has a lot of sales backgrounded people making decisions. And so I've really just prided myself in, hey, you have to learn the business and understand the business, but I take a lot of things that are my foundation from manufacturing into any role that I go in. So I've had global roles where I'm supporting a customer experience team, or I'm supporting, uh, a sales team. And so I just really lean on the foundational experiences that I have that I can lift and shift to those experiences. But, something that's very different with a more heavy sales organization. And also, this is an organization that is more, business to consumer, where all of my previous experience is business to business. And so there's even things that I didn't have to consider working at a business to business custom company, versus someone that is, the brand means a lot. and so just pivoting there has been a very big learning experience that I've genuinely enjoyed. But I also know that there are things I don't know. And so this right now in this time in my career, this is the first time I've had a career coach because there are things that I'm still needing to learn in order to be successful in this new space.
Awesome. And the
Awesome.
career coach, is that something that the organization helped you to procure, or did you look for this individual yourself?
It's funny you say that because I found one initially, and then 2 weeks later, I found out I was getting put into this program where they procured me a coach, and so I had options to choose from, and so I've been having my first few sessions, and they've been going really well because I also know there are things, tools, and capabilities that I need to be an HR executive that I didn't have to leverage in all the roles previously. So I need to make sure I'm equipped to do that because if I'm not, it doesn't just impact me. It impacts the team that reports to me. It impacts the large mass of employees that my team supports, the business partners, and everyone. So I owe it not only to myself to be a better leader, but I owe it to the people who are on my team as well as those that I support.
Awesome. Wow. Wow. Have you found over, during your career that it's this not a balance, but it's you understanding that you have to find development and training opportunities for yourself, as well as each company is kind of supporting and sponsoring you for these development training opportunities?
Yeah, no, I think it has to be a combination of both. So, what I always tell the leaders and the employees that I support when it comes to your development, my view on development is as the employee, I'm in the driver's seat. Your manager's in the passenger seat, and they're coaching you through it, telling you turn right here if you don't know where you're going, giving you that. And then HR is in the back seat with the map, making sure you all don't get off track. And so, to me, my manager can't be driving my development by himself or by herself. I have to own that. It's not going to be, oh, Chantel, you do this, Chantel, you do that. I have to want to grow myself. And I'm always looking for ways that I can grow. And that makes it that much easier for my manager to support me through those things. And so if he knows this is something I'm working on, this is a development area, that's how I get nominated for the coaching experience or, a high potential executive emerging leader conference. There are just a lot of things. If I'm very transparent with what my goals are, and I am very transparent that I'm always willing to learn, but if I don't have those conversations, that means I'm not in the driver's seat.
Awesome. Awesome. So many pearls there, being kind of intentional about what you're trying to get and making sure that you're socializing that with your leaders to
Mhm.
be in the spaces and nominated for certain things because you've already told them what you want. I think this is a good, I mean, you're an HR professional, but you're also, as an individual, very effective in this area. So you have your annual reviews, right? So you're on the other end of that as an HR person, but, as an individual, understanding that before you even get to your review, there's certain things you need to socialize way before that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have my annual reviews. We have mid-years and annuals, and I'm talking about it there, but I also have separate development conversations with my leaders so any manager you speak to, I'm not waiting for my manager to put a development conversation on the calendar. I'm going to make sure it's there because if you're waiting for someone else to tell you where your career is going and what you need to do to get there, you're going to be sitting in the same seat for quite some time. And then usually what happens in that situation is then you become upset and frustrated and angry at everyone else and not being self-reflective on what you could have done differently to own your development. So I am very much a big component of having those transparent conversations, but don't just save it for the middle of the year and the end of the year. You should be having it throughout the year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tangiel, anything else you wanted to add to that? It's just so effective. I mean, as a individual and an HR professional, she's doing both things, understanding what she has to do for herself, right? As always, look, I mean, you're here helping other people, but you have a career too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
She's giving us all of the things that, we teach and coach people along the way, even in talent acquisition, whether we're doing it with someone that's trying to get in the door or we're doing it with someone that's trying to, you know, get themselves to the next position, and we're in the quiet rooms having these quiet conversations. All of you're doing all of the right things, which I'm over here just all giddy, like a proud mom, going, "Oh, look at the baby, she's doing so good." I'm loving all of that, and I'm really excited to know that really you, I would categorize you really as someone that's rather exceptional, even though you've taken all of the right steps. And
Yes.
in addition to that, one differentiator that I pointed out, I wrote down, is that you understood two very key components to being whole and well in your career, and that is to be agile. You mentioned you got to
Hmm.
be flexible and adaptable, and then the second one was you understand business,
Yes,
and that is a very key component to working in corporate America, no
absolutely.
matter what role you have, right? If you don't understand business, you can't understand the playing field in which you're working. So,
And you can't help make
kudos.
decisions. I agree.
Right.
You can't help make decisions. And especially if you're an HR business partner, you have to build credibility. If someone who's worked in a paper mill for 30 years wants to feel like they can rely on you to help them make a decision as a leader, you have to let them know you know their business. And that's one of the things I enjoyed the most about manufacturing. I would say, "Oh, I have time off my calendar. I'm going to walk the floor. I don't have a reason to be out there. No one's in trouble." And I like to make sure I did that. So people are more warm and welcoming to HR being present. And I don't have to, bulldoze my way into business decisions. If people value knowing and wanting to get to know what they are expert in.
Sure.
Wow. If I had to neatly wrap this up, this is beautiful in that she's a she's a perfect example of
Yeah.
what we're talking about on your corporate IQ. When we talk about your corporate IQ, we're talking about your ability to navigate, the corporate space and to
Mhm.
assess a corporate space and all of these things. But I think you kind of neatly wrap up kind of everything we're talking about. Like from start to finish, there's so much there. You have all of the trappings. Like you're driven, but you also put yourself in these spaces where you get what you're supposed to get. Because that's really important when we talk about these things. You started with inroads,
Mhm.
right? So you're not someone that's just popped out of the sky, right? You're in a space that really kind of equipped you as you move through. So we have to stop and say that how you began. And then you've continued the things that you learned there, and you've continued on that continuous learning path, and you've had a great temperament and as you've gone through, but you had that beginning. You knew what you wanted, and you know that what's required also. So you go and
Yeah.
get your education. You know what's required from getting an internship perspective. So much navigation that you've done in your career, and you found yourself or put yourself in the places that you needed to be in to get to the next step and the next step. And so this
Mhm.
is how you navigate within your career. So it's not about just navigating to corporate or
Right.
navigating out of corporate. You have to navigate in the middle of corporate, like while you're in the roles, navigate from one role to the next role, to the next role, to the next company, to the next industry. It's constant navigation, which is what you're beautifully doing, in your career. You're really a classic case of what we're talking about here. It's not going to be like that for everyone, right? But it's wonderful. It's wonderful that we can actually show the listeners something like this. I mean, this is ideal in your career if you're able, if you can, and if you can even get your career back on track to do some of the things that you've done. So not everyone can do that from the beginning, but maybe take some things that you've done and make some changes in your navigation strategy and do that. Humble yourself to an internship then. Do some of
Yes.
the things to put yourself back on track and do some of the things that you've done that have been very classic, I think,
Mhm.
in a navigation uh, process in your career.
Absolutely. Well, yes. And I appreciate you all having me, and I agree. Don't let a stumble in your career, or if you didn't get off on the same track that I did, discourage you, because you always have an opportunity to change. I like to tell everyone, in the beginning of my career, I was working really, really hard. And I was always like, "Oh, I'm only getting a meets expectation. I feel like I'm running in circles and doing all this work." And then it was taking a step back and being more strategic is, yes, I'm doing a lot of work, but am I doing the work that is valued by leadership? And so once I made that pivot, things changed. And so even though I've had a really great experience, I've had my dips that I've had to, adjust and redirect and things like that. So you always have an opportunity to change the trajectory of your career.
Yeah, and that's why she can neatly say that, hey, corporate is great because you've had a great experience. You found
Absolutely.
companies that supported you and sponsored you. So she can say, hey, corporate has done what it's supposed to do for me. So
Right.
that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I have nothing further. She's perfect. This is a great experience for
She
me.
is great. Yes. Thank you again. This has been wonderful. I learned some things. I heard new information. Oh my God. I didn't know about inroads. So kudos to inroads out there. Shout out if y'all are still around.
Yes,
We
you
need
are.
to know who good. We need to have a conversation with them, Lachez.
Yes.
Yes,
They're speaking our language, right? But yeah,
absolutely.
Chantel, I'm so very proud of you, and I know that you're going to go on to do even bigger and greater things. This is just the beginning. I've been watching you, and my God, you're getting promoted like every 2 months or something like that. And I'm like, who does that in one company, right? I mean, she's doing really well. So thank you for taking the time out to meet with us today. And I just want to say to the listeners, remember to stay tuned for more episodes of your Corporate IQ podcast. We're interested in hearing from you. Send us your topics and suggestions, comments. You can send that to info@yourcorporateiq.com. Likewise, engage with us on your Corporate IQ Instagram and LinkedIn. We'd love to build an online community with you. And we'd be remiss without asking Chantel, is there anything that you would like to share with the audience in terms of how to reach you, contact you? You got some hot jobs open? I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. It's Shantel McClendon. So you can connect with me there. That's where I spend probably more of my time.
Okay, awesome. Until
Thank you. Stay tuned.
You.
High, low, clothes are open toe. You be looking good when you rock 'em, so put your heels on, girl. Them heels on, lady. Hit your ground hard, you drive me crazy. Palms get sweaty, I'm imagining things. When I see what reality brings, I get choked from your vision uncomparable. So dumb, man, I could write a parable. Killing when I go back to my rat hole living. Michelangelo